Is this the year where electric cars become cheap? Today we're in Paris to see one of the most promising new models from this new wave of cheap EVs. This is the new Citroen e-C3. It offers a near 200-mile range and a starting price less than £23,000. But is it really that impressive? Because Citroen already has an electric vehicle in its lineup, which is way cheaper than this. But the £8,000 Citroen Ami is a two-seat electric quadricycle with 8 brake horsepower and a top speed of 28 miles an hour. So even though this e-C3 is 3 times the price, you'd imagine it will appeal to a market about 100 times bigger. Now let's just point out that £23,000 is obviously still a lot of money. It's a bit of a stretch calling anything that costs £23,000 cheap. But in the context of new electric cars, the starting price for this e-C3 is really pretty staggering. So for some context, a BYD Dolphin costs around £26,000. A famously cheap MG4 is £27,000 for the entry-level version. And something like a Peugeot e-208, that costs more than £31,000. But what are you getting for your money? Because it's all very well having a very cheap product which costs less than its rivals, but if it's not actually any good, then no one's going to buy it and you're not going to sell many. Well, in the e-C3, you do not get in this car and immediately know that it is definitely the cheapest electric car on sale. The first thing to point out though is that this is a pre-production model. So we can't draw any conclusions on things like the build quality, the materials used, but it all will look like this when it goes on sale and hits the road. And it's got quite an interesting design really. You've got this fabric on the dashboard here, this interesting layout. The driving position also seems pretty good. You've got this slightly small steering wheel, which is similar to a Peugeot. And Citroen also says there is no instrument panel in the e-C3. Instead, you get a head-up display. But that is quite a confusing way to describe the setup that you have in the e-C3 because really, in effect, you do have a fully digital driver display. It's just a bit smaller and a bit further away than you'd expect. But it all does seem still fairly easy to read. You've got all the important information right in your line of sight. It is not like a Volvo EX30 or a Model 3, which really don't have a driver display at all, and instead put all the important information that you need, like the speed that you're traveling, on a central infotainment system, so you have to take your eyes off the road to see it. But you don't have that problem at all in this e-C3. And you get this setup as standard as well. Now there are 3 trim levels that you can choose from. There's entry level U, there's mid-spec plus, and there's range topping max. And there are a few differences inside between those trim levels. So we are in a max model, and you can see down here, this is the setup that you have for automatic climate controls. And if you go for a lower trim level, then you get manual air conditioning. It is good that both get physical buttons and dials to operate the climate controls. It's not hidden on a fiddly touchscreen infotainment system, which is distracting to use while driving. So that is good. Another difference to point out is the fact that on entry-level U versions of the e-C3, you will not have this fabric on the dashboard. So instead, this will be plastic. And you can imagine that it probably won't look quite as attractive as this setup that we've got in this range-topping model. Another difference is that on the top 2 trims, you have this 10.25-inch touchscreen infotainment system, which comes with wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. If you go for entry-level U, then this is swapped, and in its place, you just have a smartphone holder, which, to be honest, is probably one of the best infotainment systems out there. Other standard equipment includes rear parking sensors, you get automatic emergency braking, of course, and you also get lane keeping assistance as well. And in terms of the general practicality on offer up front, you've got decently sized door bins. You've got this armrest here with some storage underneath it. There's a cubby hole down here, 2 cup holders, and this is where your wireless phone charging is on top spec models. So, of course, we will have to wait until we see a proper production-ready version of the e-C3 before we can really say what it's like inside. But on this showing, considering the price that this is going to be on sale for, it does seem pretty decent inside. And on the outside, by the way, you might notice that this is the first Citroen to feature this new badge. And it also represents a new kind of style and look for the French manufacturer. So you can spot this interesting design for the headlights, and you've also got a chevron motif dotted around different bits of the car. There are 6 different paint colours you can choose from, and you can also customise this here. There's a choice of colours, there are some graphics you can choose, and you can even have a national flag design on it. You also get these quirky tags on the armrests in the e-C3 with these slogans on it. Anyway, what about the practicality of this car? In terms of dimensions, it is very similar to the outgoing C3. So, the only major difference between the two cars is that the ground clearance in this new e-C3 is better than it was in the previous C3. Thanks to the boxy styling of this car, it means that headroom is really very good in these rear seats. You'd have to be well over 6 foot tall to feel cramped in that respect. And even legroom is actually fairly decent for a small electric car. You've got space for your feet under the seat in front of you. And this is also a 5-seater, so you can fit 3 people back here. But you can see in this middle seat, you'll be raised up, sitting slightly higher. And because the central tunnel comes back quite far, you'd have to straddle this with your legs either side if you are sat in this middle seat. But still, overall, for a small electric car, definitely in terms of headroom, it's pretty good back here. At 310 litres, the boot is bigger than what you get in the Aura Funky Cat, or whatever that's called now, but smaller than the Dolphin and the MG4. So it's not the smallest boot, but it's also not among the most practical in the small electric car class. It's also worth noting that the boot opening is fairly small, the loading lip is high, and there's no height adjustable boot floor. There's also no underfloor storage, and there isn't a front boot. But still, it's quite a bit more practical than a Citroen Ami. It's also a lot quicker than an Ami. The e-C3 is powered by a 111 brake horsepower electric motor, giving it a 0 to 62 miles an hour time around 11 seconds and a top speed of 84 miles an hour. But while that is quicker than Citroen's electric quadricycle, it is quite a bit slower than this car's immediate rivals. However, that shouldn't be too much of a problem because you can imagine a car like this will spend most of its life driving around town. And if that is the case, then the 44 kilowatt-hour battery and the 199-mile official range on offer in the e-C3 should be plenty. But that is a bit less than what's on offer in a BYD Dolphin and an MG4. It's still, though, a lot further than you'll travel in a Mazda MX-30. When it comes to charging up, the e-C3 can accept rates up to 100 kilowatts, so you can get a 10 to 80% top up in around half an hour if you find a powerful enough charger. And by the way, the e-C3 has a lithium iron phosphate LFP battery, the kind of which we've seen in BYD's electric cars. These types of batteries bring several advantages. They're cheaper to produce, last longer, and don't require cobalt. However, LFP cells are not as energy dense as alternative batteries, meaning LFP battery packs of equivalent capacity weigh more, and they're also typically more sensitive to external temperatures. The e-C3 will get even cheaper in the future because there's set to be a new entry-level 24 kilowatt-hour version of this car launched in the future. It will only have an official range of 124 miles, and it's also not been confirmed whether it's going to come to the UK or not. But if you're in the rest of Europe, it's expected that model will have a starting price of less than 20,000 euros. And if you love the looks of the e-C3 but you don't want to go electric, there will be a petrol-powered C3 getting launched in the future. It will be available with a regular 1.2 litre petrol engine and a 1.2 litre mild hybrid as well. The pricing hasn't been confirmed, but it will be a lot cheaper than the e-C3. And in the UK, it's expected that it's going to start from around £15,000. If it does, it will be more expensive than a Dacia Sandero, but it will still be very competitive in terms of new small car pricing. Both the C3 and e-C3 are built on Citroen's so-called smart car platform, which was originally used for a version of the C3 sold in India and Latin America. That car scored a worrying 0 stars in Latin NCAP safety testing, but a host of updates are expected for these European versions. When the fully electric e-C3 does go on sale over here, it will count the Dacia Spring as its main rival. And those two electric cars will lead the charge towards more affordable EV options, with many more on the way. The current C3 accounts for almost 30% of Citroen's sales in Europe, with more than 5 million models sold in its lifetime. Will the new petrol and electric models be as popular? We're looking forward to driving them to see how it all stacks up on the road. Thanks for watching this first look of the new Citroen e-C3. If you want to see another video, then click there. And if you want to go to whatcar.com to get a great deal on your next car, click there.